Welcome back to another episode of the St. Louis podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have Darryl Tyler with Tailored Gents at Savile Row. We're going to get into the weeds with him and his business, but before we do, as always, this is the St. Louis podcast each and every Friday, except for the last 2 Fridays because I was out of town. We talk about everything St. Louis, everything business, and we'll have a good time doing so. So again, we got Darryl Tyler on the podcast. Darryl, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. A lot of people that know me know I like suits. I like dressing well, and I just told you this, I hate how a lot of men dress, and even on important days such as wedding and things like that. But before we talk about my personal thoughts on the whole situation, bring me back. You started Tailored Gents in 2015. So this year, did you celebrate your 10-year yet?
No, a lot going on with the acquisition. So for the audience that doesn't know, we acquired Savile Row, the largest men's custom clothing store in St. Louis, February of last year. And so, a lot going on with that. And so I don't know if we have to have another type of anniversary date. But 2015, well, officially I launched it 2016.
Okay.
So I'm not really off, but
Okay.
I started doing my research, attending trade shows, really looking to secure my vendors in 2015. And then I launched summer of 2016. So we're not technically off, but so that's the timeline or date that I use.
Yeah, congrats, man.
Thank you.
It's almost 10 years. It's a long time. We're going to be hitting, I think, our 10-year anniversary at Vibe Media as well next year. So you look back sometimes and you're like, it hasn't been that long, but sometimes you have those days. It's like, I've been doing this for a long time now. It feels like.
And you know what I will say, just, in this race of entrepreneurship, and it's other types of businesses if you work for a corporation, but specifically entrepreneurship is the long game. And you know how many people start in certain industries or they start certain businesses and then 2 years later they kind of phase out. And this is no knock on them, but man, it's very taxing. It's something most of us who start a business, we want to solve a problem, at a high level, and we want to do it differently than our competitors.
Yep.
So I think it's that simple.
Yeah.
I can make sweatshirts that have my name on it, but is it really solving a problem? So then there's more of an artistic feel to that type of business.
Yep.
But like our take on suiting, for instance, when I was evaluating what was being presented in the market, it was mostly made to measure, machine produce. I thought that was great. That would be, this is no knock on the cars, but let's just say there's Honda Accords and Camrys being made only in St. Louis, but you can't find a Mercedes.
Yep.
You can't find an Audi.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm like, there's a level of sophistication that's out there that would appreciate a handmade garment. And so, that was what I sought out to tackle. I didn't have that in 2016 or 2018, but I would come to different factory providers and say, hey, have you ever thought about this type of construction or having a basic fitting process where we can create a template for a client? And they're like, no, we don't really see the need for that because most of our clients, they're not asking for it.
Yeah.
And so, I always felt I'm not like most clients, even though I was newer in the game. So that was my thing. Big quality guy, strive for perfection, settle for excellence is kind of it's always been my go-to. So that was when we started, and that was what I was hoping to bring to the market. And, here we are with the acquisition. We're fortunate to, employ 11 associates, including myself.
Nice.
I feel as some of the top talent in St. Louis, with over 120 plus years of experience. So I think you feel that when you come into the shop. I think you feel passion. We all task ourselves to be very knowledgeable about not only the product and the process, but, I think there's 3 things you need to have a great suit. It starts with the fitter. Who's in front of you? How many bodies have they touched in their tenure?
Yep.
We can look at you and say, hey, low left shoulders, sports injury. You have bowed legs, flat seat, like all of those things affect how a suit drapes. So the fitter, the person that's in front of you, number one, is going to put the pattern together. Number 2, construction. How is it being made? Machine produced garments are good. It's a value proposition.
Yep.
So it's better than off the rack, but you're still going to have that machine produced tension. So there's just certain things, shoulder heads, waistbands is just not going to be as comfortable or as form fitting. And then lastly, fabric.
Yep.
We have the deepest fabric collection in the city, over 5,000 fabrics. We have one of the rarest fabric.
What do you think about polyester? Because everyone's buying stretch suits now.
Yeah, and you have to use polyester. I think it starts with education. What are you using the suit for? I think with ill-fitting suits or lesser expensive suits, they try to incorporate some stretch in it.
Yep.
And so you have some forgiveness.
Yep.
But really, if you have the proper allowances by the fitter, the person that's fitting you, then it won't be restrictive, but it'll still fit your body. So it's, most guys don't want anything too tight or too big.
Yep.
I know that sounds simple and stupid, right?
Yes.
But, I'll ask how do you want it? Well, I don't want it too tight. I want to be able to pick up a quarter, but I don't want to wear a paper sack. It's like, great. I hear you, So then it's up to us to look at your body and say, hey, we're going to fit it this way. The beauty of being able to create a fitting suit is we can work through those things before it's finished.
Yep.
So we can say, hey, how do we do on this problem spot? You say you have a prominent seat. Pants are always tight or the rise is not right. How did we do?
That's me. That's literally like how everything started with my suit buying experience.
Were you like a hockey player? Or?
No.
Yeah.
I'm just got a big butt, I guess.
Sicilian, that Italian.
Yeah, just got a big butt. And
now he's bragging.
Yeah.
Now he's bragging.
So I started, the reason I've told this a couple times. The reason I originally went to buy suits was I graduated college, went right into sales.
Okay.
And I was selling, marketing to business owners twice my age. And I felt like everyone in the marketing field had, the t-shirt backwards cap. And I was like, why don't we look as professional as humanly possible?
Right.
And it also makes yourself feel better as well. It's like a suit of armor.
Right.
But I went to Men's Warehouse. I got a suit. It looked like shit. Didn't fit in the shoulders and stuff. And they're all like, no, that's normal. That's normal. And then me being me, I go down a rabbit hole, right?
Yep.
Learn about materials and construction, which most guys couldn't care less about, to be honest, which is sad. They should care.
Yeah.
And then, the first kind of the one that's like recommended, right? If you're like the $500 range is like Suit Supply. But I still feel like, for the most part, I haven't been there in years, their pants were always way too slim.
Yeah.
And this is a common thing if you go online and read about it.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know who they're building all of these suit pants for. There's other companies online like Spear McKay, which they're based in Canada.
Yep.
And they're highly recommended. I got like a size 38 pant. And I was like, okay, my waist fits, but now everything else, it looks ridiculous.
Right.
I was like, so, at the end of the day, I was like, I have to go custom. And what a world of difference it makes when you actually have a fabric that fits you well. Because a lot of the time, most guys don't even wear anything that isn't uncomfortable now.
Right.
They're wearing athletic stuff all day long. So it's like, everything is super comfortable because there's nothing there, right?
Yeah, right.
But you don't look great.
There's a race to the bottom, especially in the Midwest,
Yes.
and it's no knock on my city. I love my city, but we travel pretty often. And, you don't see that in Chicago as much. Now these are bigger cities. So, the density. So, but by and large, the beaded belt, the hey dudes, the cargo shorts, if you're taking your.
I hate hey dudes. I'm sorry. I said this.
I'm not a big fan either.
I said this in Italy. I saw this guy wearing hey dudes. I was
He's
like,
probably from America.
I know he is.
Yeah,
I was like, they're disgusting looking.
They're not my style.
Yeah.
But I think I have more of a problem if you're going to take your wife or your spouse, significant other out on a date. Most women are going to put a certain amount of effort in.
Yep.
There's a minimum decorum that they follow if we're going to go have a nice Italian meal, right? And for guys, it's, how can I still be the most comfortable and not embarrass us?
Yeah.
So it's
much.
like, I can't go there because why? Why would I want to do that? This is me. Polo, bad shorts, and some thong sandals or whatever you call those sandals they wear.
Yep.
But then you look at the lady, and she puts in effort. And so, I don't know. My wife and I, we've always just, both of us have an agreement of, it's not even an agreement, it's an understanding. Just, we dress for each other, but we dress out of respect, for ourselves.
It's also
first.
fun. I think it's fun.
For sure. And I think it's cool when we outfit a guy and the spouse just looks at him, say, wow, I never look, it's not that they haven't looked at him, but I haven't seen you like that.
Yep.
Because you've been so casual for how many years. So, there's a social aspect, there's a professional aspect. For me, it started professionally. I was in banking.
Yep.
I started in banking in 2000, so So back then, suits were just that's what we wore. You know, there was no working around it. Potentially a polo on Friday, but as a young up and coming person, you know, I didn't wear a polo. You
Yep.
know, I wore a suit because it's just like, look, you know, whether I was busy or not, I needed to feel like, hey, I could get a call from that prospect any moment.
Exactly.
And
I
I
need to be
want to
ready
be
to go.
ready.
Yep.
And I want to be ready. I want to be on my best. And so you stated earlier, it just comes down to personal branding, and it's just, we're in a confidence business. You know, so when you wear your best, you look your best, you know, you feel your best. So, you know, for me, I got into custom just because 6'3", long arms, long legs, and so I couldn't find anything off the rack either.
Yep.
You know, so that was in 2007, and I started with a local company here. And I was just happy to have a long sleeve shirt that hit my wrists, you know, because they were always too short.
Yep.
And then I was happy to have a jacket that fit my shoulders, but then, you know, I didn't really need a long jacket, but to achieve the sleeve length, it just kept getting longer and longer to get the sleeves I needed.
Yep.
So I think most people come to custom because they want a better fit. And there could be a characteristic about them that makes it challenging off the rack. But it usually starts with fit first, 1A, then it's the selections, you know, that's 1B. But like I love the Johnny Cochran phrase, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. So we spent a lot of time on that initially because that's what it's all about for me.
Yeah.
You know, the fabrics are great, you know, we could talk about blends but you know, if it's a terrible fit, none of that really matters.
Correct.
You know?
The first thing is fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you can figure out the rest.
Correct.
You don't have that, it doesn't matter. You can spend thousands of dollars on fabric and it'll still look like shit.
Yep. Yep.
And feel like shit.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So you know, I feel like, you know, say 10 years ago, it was really kind of this slim fit suit. And I feel like that really ruined it for a lot of guys like me because you almost like felt like you had to have that slim fit. And if you have a seat, that's a nightmare waiting to happen. And
Right.
there was also a lot of like low rise, right?
Correct.
I feel like we're starting to get to the point of understanding that in order to have a good looking and good fitting suit, you need to have fabric. There needs to be more there.
Yes.
In the seat in order to have a good drape. And I look at some people like, I don't know if you've heard of Ask Odie, where on Instagram,
Oh, yeah. Everything's wide, high-waisted.
His thing, he has a lot. I wouldn't say I want to fit like his, but he does make a good point on like how everything fits. And I think we're getting there. You know, what have you kind of seen over the last 10 years of like things changing?
Yeah. So 10 years ago, so we follow Europe, but it comes through New York. So we're typically 8 years behind Europe, and then we're 4 years behind New York. So, you know, the Midwest is always slower to adapt. You know, 10 years ago, I think over-tailored is probably the word I'd use to kind of characterize, you know, how at least custom suits or suits should fit. And we kind of did a terrible job at it. You know, I think number one, it depends on your build. You know, do you have the physique to even be able to pull off a trimmer cut suit? Nothing should be tight.
Yep.
You know, but I would have larger gentlemen come in and they want, you know, the pants to not hit their shoes, but there's certain characteristics about bigger guys that is not a flattering look.
Yes.
You know, we have to take in consideration, you know, your calves are probably pretty large. And we have to bring that opening down to about a 14. You know, so you have a 20-inch calf or 18, the tapering looks terrible. It doesn't balance you. For me, it's all about balance.
Yes.
So I try to balance jacket length to leg proportion. I try to balance the allowances on chest, midsection, thigh, knee, bottom. Like all of that, you know, we're looking at the client saying, what's going to balance you the most and give you the best look? So there has been a change, I say, over the last couple of years. And really the younger folks, they're not wanting it super trim and tapered.
Yep.
You know, we really don't work with a lot of clients under 30 unless it's for weddings and special events. But, you know, well, we do have a prom business, which is really busy. But for them, we may incorporate a little stretch. We do have some higher end fabric mills that do incorporate stretch the right way. So for them, you know, you try to educate, but they want to trim, we'll do it. But mostly what you're seeing, you know, the client's 40 to 60. You know, again, they don't want anything too big.
Yep.
And they don't want anything too small. But we ask, hey, bring some garments with you that kind of illustrates how you like things to fit. And then we
Exactly.
match that. I'm not going to put you in a 14-inch trouser bottom that I wear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a certain age or you have a certain cut that you want
Right.
a full cut, fine. We'll make sure it's not sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what makes us unique. You know, we can fit the 25-year-old or the prom kid, you know, up into the 70-year-old retiree.
Yep.
Because we don't impose like how we like our things to fit. We listen to them and say, hey, yeah, let's do that.
I look back at my prom photos. I look like a goof.
Yeah. I rented.
I rented.
Shout out to 97.
I didn't. No one told me to pull my pants up.
Yeah.
So they're like sagging.
Right.
And I get, you know, the fabric's just bunching. I'm like, I need to delete this photo. This is
and I drove
terrible.
a Camry. So let's see. I had a rented tuxedo and I drove a Camry from my uncle, and you couldn't tell me anything. Now kids are doing custom suits, $1,000 Gucci sneakers. They're renting Porsches from
that's
Turo.
crazy. That's crazy.
So by the time they're in it, it's $4 or $5 grand.
Damn.
Yeah.
I don't think I cared that much in prom.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
What, you know, that's what I always thought is like, where did it end? Or so you look back at photos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like plane travel in like the 50s and 60s, and you look back, everyone's wearing a suit, but at some point, it's almost like it all died at once. Because it doesn't seem like it was a slow thing. It seemed like all of a sudden, just
within a decade,
it was like
which
everyone.
Decade is it?
Everyone just stopped wearing suits.
It's probably the 90s.
Yeah.
Because I think the 80s it was still, but I think in the 90s.
Because, you know, I grew up I was born in 93, so I grew up in the 90s and 2000s, and you didn't really see many people wearing suits.
No.
Like at all.
80s for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it was the 90s.
Because you look at like 80s Wall Street movies.
Right.
Great.
Exactly. Yeah. Fuller cut, which is coming back. You know, so the 80s cut we're seeing a lot of that now in Europe, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll hit St. Louis in 2035.
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly.
But I think even for myself, you know, I've made a few things over the last couple of months, and I've even kicked out my allowances, meaning I've even given myself more room and incorporating a little bit more comfort into it. You know, it's not going to be oversized, but again, you know, just things change. We wanted things super trim 6, 7, 8 years ago. Now it's kind of the pendulum shifting a little bit. Like I said, nothing sloppy, but I think higher rise trousers. Let me go back to the trouser rise. So, you know, many clients who come in, you know, it's an education because most of our first time clients are first time custom buyers. So they're not familiar with that. They've only experienced what's off the rack. So part of the education is the trouser rise. They may come in with some Lululemon, you know, traveler pants, and the rise is naturally lower and shorter. You know, so they say, hey, I want to wear my pants more on the hips. The problem with that with dress pants, if it's not closer to your natural waist, which is, I'd say most guys an inch and a half below their belly button. Most aren't like the gentleman you mentioned where they're right below his chest.
That's too much. Yeah.
But in order to have the pant properly draped, you need to have it to where it's right around your natural waist within an inch and a half. And so the nice thing about doing a fitting is if someone's hell bent on having that short rise, you know, I'll make a try-on pant just like that of the suit, and then they'll see how there's not enough coverage. They'll see how the pant is not draping off the seat, and there's collapsing. There's things that happen because the rise isn't proper. So again, and I think if you put on a try-on pant that has a little higher rise and you show them where it should hit, and you show them how clean the silhouette of the pant is, you know, then they become, and I'm like, this got to be more comfortable.
Yes.
You know, so a lot of it's just education, you know, and then lastly, when you put a jacket on, when you have a really low rise trouser, you know, now you have to be mindful of how much shirt is going to show below the button closure of the jacket. The lower the rise, the more shirt potentially. So you either got to close the front. This is probably getting too technical.
No, go for it. No, go for it. Hey,
so
I'm here.
You have to close the front of the jacket more. You know, but still visually, when you look at the proportion between the jacket length and the trouser, it really starts in that, you know, in that waist and kind of that fly area. So when you have a low rise, it's kind of low, you know, so it doesn't really work. So you need the trouser to be closer to your natural waist. So when you button it, you know, you're not seeing any shirt below, and it shouldn't be tight enough where you do it. I'd have to show you. I think you're following me.
I understand. Yeah. So there's something that actually now if you go on like I'm on men's fashion sometimes on
You're into
on
this.
Reddit.
I like it.
Yeah.
You're into this.
I'm a nerd.
I saw the suit when I came in, man.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. And a lot like there is so many like the common feedback is get rid of the skinny pants, and for even in shape guys but just an athletic build, I guess it's like get medium rise pants that go up to where it naturally sits.
Yeah.
And literally people do it and it's like a game changer. It was a game changer for me because I was like, oh, this fits way better.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually Ask Odie that I saw say that a couple years ago. He's just like, raise the pan up.
Yeah.
And also you look at some of those guys as well. Like if you're a real nerd, you listen to Sartorial Talks on YouTube, which I haven't in a long time, but I love that couple. You just look at like bespoke fitting and some of this stuff. It's like that is where it sits on all of them.
Right.
So they know.
Yeah. I mean, so we told the line, right? You know, most guys that are 40 years old aren't going to want a 12-inch rise that's going to hit right at their belly button.
Right.
You know, so.
I do have a suit like that. And
it's comfortable, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's very weird. It's hot, though. It gets hot.
Yeah.
But, then I got that suit, and then I was like, I should get some braces.
Yes.
So I started wearing braces sometimes at the end of last year, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Because really a belt
is not it.
You know, if you're 12 inches and it's more that natural waist, you know, typically we'll kick the waist out about an inch because once you put the braces in, it kind of needs a floating place.
Yes.
You know, so you don't want the same tension and tautness as a belt, you know, or even side tabs are going to pull it really tight. So tuxedos, even if they don't want that rise, you know, leave a little room just because if you do wear braces, it needs to float a little bit.
Yes.
It's supposed to kind of hover. I mean, it needs to be tight enough to keep your shirt tucked in, but not as tight as like belt tension.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, but it's like I said, it's more comfortable. You know, the movement, but we're not there yet. Not in St. Louis.
I know.
Not yet. But you know, guys are embracing more natural ways. I've had a better job of convincing guys over the last 12 to 18 months not to do the hip, you know, wearing pants on their hip. Now there are some guys based on their build, if they have a little bit of a belly, you know, it's not going to come much higher than that unless they're going to bring it over their belly.
Yes.
And they don't want to look like the penguin.
Yep.
So for there, but that's really important too, because then you have to shorten the rise, because if not, you know, you have all this rise below.
Yep.
So
and you look ridiculous.
So there's all these nuances. Hence why I wanted to have, you know, the ability to make fitting garments, because, you know, we fit all sizes. We've had gentlemen 400 or 500 pounds. Like, where are they going to go?
Yep.
Many times they are built like a pyramid. This is no disrespect, but just trying to describe to our audience. So most suits are built like an inverted pyramid where your shoulders are more broad, and then it's supposed to taper to your midsection, and then kick out at your hip. But when you're a larger gentleman, you know, of that size, you know, it's the opposite. So shoulders are still small because no one's really naturally that big, you know, but then everything just gets bigger. And so, you know, but for me, those are some of the best fittings because they've never had anything that they can find off the rack, you know, and you're still able to keep them comfortable. So I love like the out of the ordinary. We had a gentleman that was wheelchair bound. And so, you know, normally, even like I'm myself sitting in this chair, I find myself not being able to have my jacket, the bottom part, to be really comfortable. I'm sitting on it. You know, it's up against. So just think if you're in a wheelchair. And then you need some mobility. So this guy, I mean, love this guy. You know, so not only incorporated a little stretch for him, you know, we were able to deepen the armhole, just kind of give him a gusset for that range of movement. But then, you know, we created a jacket.
You actually built a gusset into it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then we created a button stance that was a little bit lower. So we gave it a little bit more of a formal feeling. But then we cut it back so he wasn't sitting on it. I mean, it was the coolest thing. And then the back of the jacket, we had to stop right where, you know, the back of the wheelchair hit the bottom of the seat.
So
he
he's
wasn't
not sitting on it.
You know, so just taking all of those things
awesome.
into consideration, saying, hey, let me get my pattern maker and let's just go ahead and sketch this out. You know, so I love those types of, because for someone like that, you know, they've had challenges just with mobility, bigger biceps. You know, they're carting themselves around. You know, so, you know, but they may have a normal chest. So, you know, if you got 16-inch biceps and you're in 40 chest, there's no coat. He's going to be in a 48 coat, right? So that's the beauty of, just problem solving, man. That's it. Just problem solving. And we don't run away from it. We're like, look, I'll try anything, and after a couple fittings, if it's not where we want it, I'll refund you. But I don't think we've really had a challenge that it didn't satisfy both of us, because I'm in particular.
Yeah.
It's got to meet a quality standard before it goes out of the door.
Well, it's satisfying for you because that's exactly why you started this, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's problem solving.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about some of my gripes, right?
All right.
So let's I brought this up to you before. Wedding. No offense to the ladies out there, all offense to the males.
It's his day too, right?
Yes, that's right. So, a lot of the time the bride will spend over $1,000 on a dress that they essentially wear one time.
Correct.
I have no problem with that, by the way. Spend as much as you want. I do have a problem, though, when the husband goes to, let's just call it Men's Warehouse or Joseph A. Bank or any of these other ones, where if you bring 5 people there, right, to rent the suit for the wedding, they essentially get a free suit. But it doesn't matter because now everyone at that wedding looks like shit. The bridesmaids almost always look better than the guys, simply due to the fact, because like at Men's Warehouse, I was just at a wedding. They looked goofy. They looked ridiculous, and it's because they couldn't slim any of the pants.
Yeah,
they had to go strictly by waist size, and that was it. Correct. And that's what they had to wear. And I'm like, you do this one time. Why not look? Why not? All right, to keep the bridesmaids and the wedding party out of it, just them two. It's like, why would you not want the guy to look as good as possible? Especially for them spending money on a suit that they're not going to wear once, right? They can wear forever.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
So we have a huge wedding business. I would say that most of our clientele is going to be the groom, father of the bride, father of the groom, and then just the weekend of events. So the groom can expand to rehearsal dinner and then a reception change. So we are seeing brides changing, more frequently now for the reception. So, depending on what that looks like, we try to follow suit. So let's talk about the order of focus on a wedding party from the audience. So the groom is the bride is number one.
Yes.
Everyone focus on the bride as they should.
Yep.
Assuming it's a man and a woman.
Sure.
So they focus on the bride first, then the groom. Then it's the bridesmaids. I mean, naturally, right? Then it's the groomsmen.
Yes.
So we're like, just don't mess it up.
Yes.
And most of the groomsmen are going to rent. That's just the nature of it. You look at the cost of a bridesmaid dress and then a rental, they're probably similar.
Sure.
$200-$300 to rent, $200 to $500 for a bridesmaid dress. Now, here's the difference between the two. Excuse me. A bridesmaid's dress can be bought bigger, and it's a soft thing.
Yeah.
And it can be tailored around that person wearing it. When you start with an ill-fitting or a lesser quality suit, it all starts with the materials and the fabric.
Yeah.
We don't have anybody fitting you. So, the 3 things I said you need for a good suit: fitter, fabric, and construction. So we don't have a fitter because it's off the rack.
Yep.
So now we look at construction.
Yeah.
It's all fused, usually means that it's glued on the inside.
Sweating your ass off.
It's been dry cleaned 500 times. Okay, so things are breaking down, just not keeping the same structure.
Yeah.
And then, most of it's like a poly blend. So, and then lastly, say you have an athletic build, broad shoulders, biceps, chest. So what do we have to do? We have to go up in size. But guess what happens if you have a tapered midsection? It's too big.
Way too big, yeah.
So we can't take it in because you either got to go up or down a full jacket size. So when you have a less expensive, ready-to-wear garment with all of these different body types that we know are in a wedding party, big guys, small guys. You can have a guy that's 5'6", that's tiny. He's going to want it tapered, right? He's going to want it to fit him. Maybe not tapered, but he's just a smaller statured guy.
Yeah.
So he's probably going to be swimming in his.
Yeah, balloon pants.
Correct.
Yes.
So,
yes.
They're making these cuts for the masses.
Yep.
And really what that means is, a 34, they'll have a couple of different fit profiles. So it's really challenging when you have a wedding party for the groomsmen to go custom or made to measure. I mean, I'd even opt for, if it's $400 or $500, they can buy a tux typically from these rental places, and then they can at least have it altered.
Okay.
So I would steer them that way. It's like I understand that every wedding party, you're not going to ask your groomsmen to spend $1,000, $1,500 for made to measure.
Yeah.
But a lot of these companies, you can get a
But
purchase.
some of these guys need to spend that money. They don't have suits.
I know. But I'm trying to, I'm toting the line. So at least they can buy it and have it altered.
Yeah.
So let's get to the groom.
Mm-hmm.
So you made the great comparison of, the bride will buy her dress, $1,000, $2,500. It's not uncommon that, the groom that we were working with spends more on his tux suit than she spent. But again, things can be tailored around her because it's a soft garment.
Yep.
For a guy, if the materials are less expensive or cheap, he's never going to get the look he wants, even if it's tailored.
Yep.
So for us, we make a tuxedo or suit. Our somewhat saving grade or our negotiating point is he can wear this thing again. If it's a tuxedo, 50% of weddings today are a black tie.
Yep.
So, and most people getting married are probably upper 20s to 40. So there's going to be more weddings in their future.
It's interesting that we're going so formal with weddings with black tie.
Why do people watch the Oscars?
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of black suits.
Okay. But
black tuxes are different. Black tuxes are different.
But why do people watch the Oscars? How many people are in like pink tuxedos,
Yeah.
teal?
Yeah.
90% are what? Black tux, white shirt, or ivory?
Yep.
And why? It's uniform. It just, for us, it's our uniform, and it's almost like military uniforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you see 100 soldiers, in their blues, I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy, right?
Yep.
The patent leather shoe, it just all works.
Yeah.
So I think you're seeing that it's just a uniformity, number one, with photography.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's in their best. I think it invites your guests to go up a level.
Yeah.
Even if it's not black tie, mandatory is black tie. Optional is what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
That just means
wear
if
a
you
suit,
can swing
pretty
it,
much. Yeah.
but wear something as high as you can go.
Yep.
So I think they're just being more mindful. And honestly, when you see the photos, not saying a suit looks good, but nothing looks as good as a tux, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't even have a tux. I need to get one.
I mean, depends on if you're are you using it?
I could use it.
Do you get invited to events and not having a tux make your decision sway that? Because
to not go, yes.
Because I understand you care about dressing, right?
Yeah, to not go.
So for you, it's your brand.
Yes.
You can't show up in some ill-fitting tux.
Correct.
So what I found is if someone can swing the investment, many guys, there's philanthropic opportunity, there's scalers, especially in the fall, winter. And it's like when they have it, now if they get an invitation, they can truly judge it if they want to go.
That's me. Yeah, it's me.
As opposed to like, oh man, that could be cool, but I'm not rolling in there, with some off the rack or some rental.
Yep.
So I've seen that,
I like the midnight navy.
Yeah.
Big fan. I don't know why.
It's a good. I'd say out of 10 tuxes, we'll probably see one midnight navy.
I don't know. I just like to be different, I guess.
And grosgrain.
Yeah.
Grosgrain is the other outside of satin.
What is that?
So grosgrain is kind of it's like a micro striped formal treatment. I'll send you a picture of it, but it's the opposite of satin.
Okay, interesting.
So that's a choice too. I'd say that's coming around a little bit, but you have to have all of the accessories to, you're not going to mix and match grosgrain and satin.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another formal treatment option that we're seeing more of.
See, what I was saying for my wedding when I eventually hopefully get married is I was like, I will your guys's wedding party presents, I'll buy you a jacket.
Okay.
Buy the pants.
Yeah. I think that's fair. That's more than fair.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'd just be stupid to turn that deal down.
You know what the trend is now for weddings? We can do a whole segment on weddings. The trend now is, I'd say 1 out of 2 consultations we've had this year, no wedding party. Just the bride and groom.
Interesting.
And part of it is ill-fitting tuxes. Part of it is rounding up your wedding party.
You're asking a lot for the wedding party. It's a lot of money to be in a wedding party. And you got to travel. You probably got a bachelor or bachelorette party.
Yeah. So they still have those. They still have rehearsal dinners.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that would have been in it makes up their audience outside of family.
Interesting. Yeah.
But we're seeing less. I think you're seeing a shift of folks being a little bit older too, like traditional weddings.
Yep.
It's not uncommon, 35, 40. 45.
That's what I'm gonna be in one of those.
Yeah. So when we got married, in 2007, we had 300 guests.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to get married now, 45, I probably have 125.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be nicer, but I don't know 300 people I'd want there now. So the older you get too, I think the numbers come down a little bit. They focus more on quality, But then some are deciding, look, we'll just spend the money. Let's just focus on. She'll have her dress. I want the groom to look like money.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to worry about the ill-fitting suits that are on this side.
Yeah.
And then the bridesmaids' dresses in the different colors.
I always thought it was odd that they stand up there anyways.
Yeah.
Because they don't do anything.
I can't wait to see your wedding. It sounds like it's going to be just you and whomever you choose to marry. You know, if you have a wedding party, you may not do it. That'd be just one less thing you have to worry about.
That is true.
Or you just have one person. Like if you got like one person, we're seeing that too. Just like, hey,
just like the best man and
just the best man. Because then they'll typically do custom.
Yeah.
Because now it's a little bit more.
Ooh,
focused.
I could swing that.
Now this is a little bit.
It's becoming better. I'm liking
more
this.
Focus on the two of you.
Yeah.
So we had one. A guy, he did a green tux, and then he had his brother in the black tux, and it looked awesome, you know. And then the bridesmaid or the matron of honor, I think she had like a green dress. So it was cool. Very clean, very put together, and then you didn't have to worry about the ill-fitting suits on the other side. We scaled back on doing rentals. We're almost out of that business just because we did it as a complimentary service because a guy said, hey, I want a midnight navy tux or I want a blue suit for my wedding. And I say, well, what color, shade? What's the shade? And they're like, well, here's a picture. And we're saying, no, we need the actual fabric to match it. You know, I have 500 navies that I can match it with. So we made a decision to partner with a rental company. The problem is we're just particular about how things fit. And we found that a lot of folks from the wedding party would see how the groom was being fit. And then they may not want a custom, but they just, depending on their build, they didn't love it.
Yep.
And I didn't love it because it's a rental, right? But we're just doing it as a complimentary service.
Yes.
But it's just, I never wanted our reputation to take a hit because an ill-fitting tuxedo was put on a groomsman, and for whatever reason, they just hated it.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're kind of limited to what's being offered in the different models. So, reputation control, I would say. So we kind of, we phased out of that just because, again, if you want to give us a review on a custom suit, I mean, that's our trademark.
Yep.
We understand that, but for the rental, it's like it
also seems tough to just manage that. You're always making alterations at some point.
They come on a Wednesday or Thursday, So typically, if it's a big party, it's hard to really have it booked in advance.
Yep.
Because depending on when they're dropped off, it was just, it wasn't fun.
No.
And my associates, shout out to them. They're like, all right, how much longer are we gonna do this? I'm like, all right, let's get rid of that.
Yeah, we're done. We're done doing it. So what are your thoughts? You actually brought up dry cleaning, and I was actually reading something a couple months ago saying essentially you should dry clean as little as humanly possible.
Could be, yes.
Like there's people that say they go years without dry cleaning.
It depends on.
But of course, if it smells or something,
it depends on the person. Depends on how they perspire. It depends on a lot of things. But really, the rule of thumb, number one, dry cleaning is very, very harsh.
Yes.
Depending on the company, depending on the operator who's who's doing these things. If you have a really nice made garment, floating canvas, great fabric, depending on the fabric, the chemicals are harsh, the pressing, all of that is very harsh. So, we recommend, just 2 to 4 times per year.
Yeah.
I know that's hard. Usually what mostly gets worn is the pants.
Yes.
Right. So that's tough. So we always say incorporate. You buy a suit and it's like a staple Navy suit that's going to be your go-to, buy 2 pairs of pants.
So I've asked this before, and that was something actually I think that Sartorial Talks talked about. He's like, buy 2 pairs of pants.
Right.
Because
for yours, like this is a beautiful suit. But, I don't know if you're going to wear it that much. It just depends, right?
Yes.
But
The ones that are going to workhorse.
Say you're a financial advisor and you need a nice blue and you need a nice gray and you're going to do sport coats outside of that.
Yes.
So these are my 2 workhorses that I'm going to wear, 3 or 4 times a month. I would say add a second pair of pants because that's what's going to wear out first. Keys, rubbing your pant leg. You just, when you sit down, your legs and things expand.
Yep.
So you put a lot of stress on the seams. Hopefully the quality's there, but just over time, you ever see a pair of pants that get shiny? That's usually from a number of different reasons. But we always advise, 2 pairs of pants. But back to your dry cleaning question or comment, it's tough. First thing I ask the client, do you sweat? Is it body or is it under the arms? If it's under the arms or shirts that you can get to kind of protect that.
Yep.
To keep it from being soiled. Body, a little different, but it doesn't have the same smell as underarms. So more than your listeners probably want to listen here. But
well, I find it interesting that I run hot.
Okay.
And I sweat, but like in polyester clothes, like a gym shirt, it'll smell terrible after one workout.
Yeah.
I could sweat in a suit 5 to 10 times, and you wouldn't know.
Right.
Couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that natural fabric, right?
Lining, silk or viscose.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, if it's wool, most resilient fabric you can use, most tailorable type of fabric. So that's the beauty of wool. I mean, it takes
I was in Italy though. I'm like, I need to get some linen suits.
Yeah.
Because I just recently started buying a lot more linen at the beginning of last year. Just so I run hot, and I'm like, even wool is just hot in the summer. I don't care what kind of wool it is. I haven't found something that's just like, oh, man, it's actually like somewhat breathable, but I don't know. Something about linen. We're way behind the times here.
Let me see your jacket. Will you open your jacket, please? So one of the things you could consider is, like an eighth lining.
Yeah.
So when you have a fully lined garment, it's about 8 to 10 degrees warmer than if you were to unline it. So
interesting.
Buy a linen suit, get it unlined. If you run hot, next time you have your custom suit made, ask your provider to do it quarter or an eighth line.
Yeah.
And then that lets, because typically the heat starts in the body.
Yes.
So that lets about 8 to 10 degrees. It'll bring it down about 8 to 10 degrees. It's a big difference. So any of my summer suits, summer suits, I always do them unlined. Now you're going to give up a little bit on the drape in the back because you don't have the weight of the lining.
Sure.
A little bit more technical, but I always say you got to give up something to get something, right?
Hey.
So in exchange for more comfortability, cooler temperatures, you give up a little bit. But if it's made for you and the fitter's good, it's still gonna drape well. But that's just me being, an insane perfectionist.
That's fair. Yeah, everyone in Italy was wearing linen.
Yeah,
absolutely everyone.
Check out our post yesterday on Instagram. I had a linen suit on, and I said, "Embrace the wrinkle." A lot of people don't like linen because of wrinkles, but that's part of the characteristics of linen to give you that breathability. Number 2, especially spring, summer weight fabrics, you don't want it as close to the body.
Mm-hmm.
You want air to be able to pass through.
Yes.
So that's important. How it's cut, not having it lined. Though, maybe do half canvas. Most of our suits are full canvas. That's how it comes. You're going to get the best drape in the front.
Yep.
Our canvas, it molds to you every time you wear it. So as you wear it, the garment becomes more form-fitting. But what's the application? If it's a summer suit that's made out of a linen blend, I'll probably do half canvas unlined. That way it's not as heavy. So
yeah,
when we have a conversation about, the application of the garment, those are the things we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys, they say, hey, I want double-breasted. It's a summer jacket. It's like, well, do you run hot? Double-breasted looks best closed.
Yeah.
Yep. So unless you're in like Europe and they wear it open and they're oversized.
I haven't embraced the double-breasted yet.
Yeah, but if a guy wants it, I like to go through what a day is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what they want to do, great. We'd love to cut them one. But those are things you have to be mindful of. Looks best clothes. Well, man, I run hot, and it's a summer jacket. It's like, well,
don't get
today is going to be 96, right?
Yeah.
So I did a polo, and I'm not wearing double-breasted because I know when I stand up, when I do my fittings today, it looks best closed because the panels are really big.
Yes, correct.
Again, just details or little things that, I obsess about.
A double-breasted open looks, I've seen it. I've seen some photos where it doesn't look bad, but it's a lot. You got a lot here.
Yes. Yep.
You know what I hate on the double-breasted is for some reason there's the 6 buttons, right?
If you want it.
I want to remove the ones that are right by the
So do 4 on
chest.
2. Do 4 on 2.
I think they look ridiculous up here.
It's the beauty of custom.
I know. I just
you don't have to do it.
I just see it. I'm like, what is going on here?
So you like a 4 on 2 closure? That's fine. We sell both. So I like to show a picture. Say, hey, which one do you like? And then some guys like the extra buttons and the details.
Almost like you got nipple rings on or
that
something.
Is correct.
It's like, what are we even doing?
What you don't want to do is metal buttons. So like gold buttons.
No.
So when you put gold buttons up high, it's really hard to have the tautness because they're heavy.
Yeah.
Typically like horn buttons, we use real horn buttons from Buffalo. But gold buttons are heavy. So typically you want them lower.
Yes.
Because if not, it's not a good look. But again, it's your fitter.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want gold buttons on a double-breasted, let's do 4 on 2.
Yes.
Let's keep them low.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I know we got a couple minutes left. tell the people, you want to show off some fabric real quick? I know you brought
I just
this
had
stuff.
some props, you know. Yeah, so this we're
I love Skiball.
we're in our summer season, so clients are embracing typically blends. So, you know, I like to have a base of wool.
That's
If
crazy.
a guy doesn't have a deep wardrobe, you know, wool is going to be your most tailorable type of fabric. And then I like to incorporate a little silk or a little linen, a little cotton to just make it more seasonal. I didn't make my comment earlier though. I was going to say, you know, what's been really cool with our fabric offerings is, you know, we've been entrusted with some very unique fabrics, but our claim to fame, what we carry is vicuña, the rarest fabric in the world.
Interesting.
You know, they have to catch the animal and shear it once per year. It's all government controlled.
Really?
But it's the softest.
What's it called?
It's called vicuña, Vicuna. So there's only 10 collections, and it's through Skiball. There's only 10 collections in the country, and we have one here in St. Louis.
Interesting.
That's pretty cool, man.
That is awesome. Yeah.
I don't know what it costs to have that sample book, but, you know, the pseudo range about 50.
Damn.
Yeah.
So what's so good about the fabric? Is it actually worth it, or is it kind of just a flex?
I mean, you'd have to feel it, but it's just the hand of it. You know, it's a few levels up from cashmere. Why do people love cashmere? It's just the softness of it.
Yep.
It screams luxury.
You
know, so vicuña is like, it's a couple levels above that.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's good stuff. What was your question? You're gonna no, I think one thing we were just going to show, I mean, we're crazy about our fitting. So, you know, we take about 50 measurements, give or take, you know, but outside of just the laterals and skin measurements, posture readings, shoulder and arm pitch, you know, all of those things are important, you know, so we get really dialed in. We take photos of every client in their fitting process, and then we analyze that, you know, just see if we missed anything. Many times we're having a conversation, we're learning about their family, where they like to travel, their hobby, you know, you want to get to know them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, we're human. So I like to be able to revisit, you know, what I saw and say, all right, I confirmed that low left shoulder from the hockey injury, you know, so for us, you know, there's a process that is very important to create that initial pattern, you know, before we create like that basic or that template garment to see how we did. So, you know, we want to be at 80 or 90% when that template comes in. You don't want to be at 50%.
Correct.
You know, that just...
It sucks when you go
want
in
confidence of your client. Not saying, you know, sometimes you have hard fits. And many times I'll know that before, and I'll say, look, you know, for you, I had a guy, really full chest. I mean, just, you know, like Mr. Incredible.
Yeah.
And everything else was normal. But his chest and his back was pretty. So, you know, he had kind of a rounded back, so it consumes the back length, so it looks short. Then he had a full chest, so you don't want the bow or pucker. You know, for him, I'm like, look, it'll probably be 60 or 70% where I want it. So I got to do 2 fittings on the jacket. But I was up front. I'm like, look, I want to, but it's been a problem area for him for years.
So he's like, what? Let's do it.
He's in a position where
he's
like, look, I need to look good. You know, I need to be confident. And so he understood, but that's why he chose us. He's like, look, I've been in many different places, and they all say they can fix it, and they haven't. And so, you know, for someone like that, or maybe a larger gentleman, I may say, hey, there's 2 fittings and then a final. And we like to be upfront. You know, I'll push back if I can only do 1, depending on how they're built. You know, I'll pass. You know, if it's not gonna pass our quality check, you know, I'd rather pass. You know, if we don't have the ample time. And guys aren't great planners.
Correct.
Love my guys, but man, you know, they put a lot of pressure on us.
I got a wedding in a week. It's like, well,
we get it. Yeah, we get it. I was working on my groomsmen. I'm like, really? You know, but we get it. Or it's in a month. Yeah, and it's typically not a 40 regular. You know, usually the guys are short. You know, normally they can be more challenging off the rack. So, you know, that's one thing I would like to part with is like, you know, if you want to, we're not here to convince people to go custom. I know how great custom is, but it's like saying everybody should buy a Benz or a Bentley. I understand that, you know, but if you do want to buy a luxury car and say you had that dealership, of course you want to. So that's what we are as far as custom. If you feel that custom's your realm, you know, we would say just do some research, you know, with your fitter, you know, maybe ask about a few fittings in that body type. That's helpful. Check reviews, you know, just kick the tires, you know, and I think consumers are very educated, but kick the tires, you know, how do you feel? Like when you look at their story and their social media and their website and their response, like we're not, these aren't big companies, right? Most of what's here outside of Suit Supply and Indochino.
Correct. Yeah.
Most of these are privately held companies.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
when you walk in, what's the vibe?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a little hesitation? Do they seem unsure like that? To me, that's all building a story.
Mm-hmm.
And you should feel good, and you should feel like, all right, I'm picking them because you're spending a lot of money. It doesn't matter what shop you go to.
Yep.
Most of these suits are over $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. That's a huge investment in my opinion. I don't care what your income status is.
Correct.
And so, you want to make sure you pick the right one. So ask questions. That's why we like to educate. Even when clients come in and I see a guy with a certain build, say, you know what, be mindful of this if you don't come back, because they're going to need to address that to make sure.
Yes.
And so ask for pictures, So that's what I would partner with. Just, ask questions, interview them, go in, see how knowledgeable they are about fabric, the process, what's recourse. You make a tuxedo and the pants too trim. Well, you have a side satin seam that you really can't move.
Yep.
So you got a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch at the most to make a movement in or out. After that, you throw off the symmetry of the side of the pan, and it's just so. Again, I'm just a little particular.
Yeah. Well, like you said it, I mean, you said it best. When you're spending good money on something, you want it to fit well, and you want to be happy with your purchase.
Yes.
I mean, that's the big thing, especially if it's like your first time doing it,
right?
Even second or third time, and you're really you've been used to the same blue suit that every single person owns on the planet. That's from Men's Warehouse. I'm sure we know it.
Yep.
It's important to make sure that stuff is going well. So
yeah.
Thank you for coming today.
Yeah, we appreciate
awesome.
you having us, and we love to be able to tell our story. And this is just our little slice of heaven in the St. Louis market. And man, shout out to our clients, shout out to our vendors, shout out to our talented staff. I mean, we have the best staff. I think it takes a lot. Shout out to the families of our staff. It takes a lot of different shareholders, if you will, to believe in an entrepreneur. And so we don't do it alone. I'm here representing Tailored Gents, but man, there's some super talented people at our shop, our vendors, who trust us, that's going to give us the best, so I don't take that for granted, man. It's, I think sometimes that's glazed over. You got the person that's there and they're pumping their chest, and it's like, no, there's so many, the clients. What are we without clients? What are we without the best vendors? What are we without the talented staff? And then the families that support them. People have choices. So that's it, man. Just is how that sounds.
Go to their website. We'll have it linked below.
Yeah.
What's the site?
Yeah.
What's
tailoredgents.com.
Perfect. And what's your address? Where are you guys at in Clayton?
We're at 8101 Maryland, the sexiest corner in Clayton, corner of Maryland and Brentwood, across from Oceano, our great neighbors, Herbie's. So we make up one of the 4 quadrants there on Brentwood and Maryland.
Yeah, check them out.
Please do.
And if you're about to have a wedding, if you're thinking about getting married, if you're in the wedding party and you don't know what the groom is wearing, send them this video in its entirety. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Darryl.
likewise. Pleasure meeting you.
It's been fun.
Let's keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Stop by anytime.
Love it. We'll see you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.